So the big question is this: how do young men like us, who didn't listen to society, who are on our own, how do we grow and improve ourselves so that we can live a better tomorrow? That is the question, and this show will give you the answers. My name is James Radzinski, and welcome to the Ascend Momentum Show. Welcome back. So, it's been 10 episodes ago, I discovered a document, a CIA document. Episode 45 was when I started to talk about that CIA document, the declassified CIA document on the analysis and assessment of the gateway process. Now, I've been doing some further research and I actually found another PDF. So before I had the analysis and assessment of the gateway process, Monroe Institute, who are like, I don't know exactly what it's called, but the first paragraph caption or paragraph title was called Who Are We? And then the gateway process workbook. And then I found another one the other day and I printed it out, or I found the other one yesterday and I printed it out today at school. And it is called My Experience at the Monroe Institute or something like that. I have not read it yet, but I plan on reading it. So I want to give an update. My CD was supposed to come today, but I do not believe it will come for a little while because there's a delay at customs. So I don't know, but that is what is happening right now. And the CD is the first wave. So I bought the first wave of the gateway process. But it's okay. The world will bring it when it needs to come. It will come when it needs to come. I want to talk about transurfing. I want to talk about studying in particular. So, as you guys know, I've been studying reality transurfing for the past couple months. And it's almost coming to an end. I've almost completed it the second time. I'm probably like 200 pages away from finishing it. So I'm probably like 2 or 3 weeks maybe away from, I think 2 weeks away from completing it. So what that means is I'm looking for the next book to read. And I've already decided the next book I'm reading, and I'm actually going to read 7 books. This is what I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I discovered this new reading method, which I want to test out because I'm not actually sure if it works or not. But if it does, it'll be very good. And it's basically where you get 7 books all at once, pick up the first one, read until you lose focus, and then switch, and then read till you lose focus, then switch, and then keep cycling. And then every once in a while do some push-ups, and then just keep at it. And the person who told me about that was the author of the Dancing After the Music Stops. And I didn't read that book yet, but it's in my closet, and it's going to be in the first cycle of 7. And I learned about that on his website, The Most Beautiful World. And I learned it on the part of on his website called the reading list. And if you go to The Most Beautiful World and then go click on the books option, and then on the top, there's going to be the reading list. And then that's how you get to it. And I'm pretty much going to follow that reading list until I decide otherwise. And I already made I already decided upon the first 7 books that I'm going to read for the first set. First 7 books that I'm going to read, I added in a few that were not in the reading list, or like 1 or 2. And that's because I just want to read those as well. So the first 7 books, I'll tell you. Tufti the Priestess. It's by Vadim Zeland. And then Die Wise. And then honestly, I forgot. I forgot what the first 7 books are. I wrote it down though, so it should be fine. And then I know that Journey Out of Bodies is one of them. And then it's the Egypt Code, and then Sacred Economics. And then there's 2 more. I forgot which ones. But one of them is like the third or the second, or I think it's the second book on the reading list. And then there's another one, maybe the fourth or third. I mean, I'm not sure exactly, but I wrote it down during class, and that is basically my plan. I'm going to try and read a book a day. Or at least like more than 1 book a week using this reading method. I'm going to try and crank out all of these books in the reading list. I'm going to try and get them all done, because that's the ultimate reading list for human beings. And my knowledge will greatly expand once I read all those. So that's pretty much where I'm at with that. And also my Bolt score is 11 seconds. So it's not going up that much. I'm kind of stagnant. But today it actually rained all day, and I bike no matter what, rain or shine. And that was honestly, it is so valuable to follow coordinating intention. It's one of the principles in transurfing, and I think it's one of the most powerful principles. Because if you coordinating intention is basically perceiving everything that happens to you as beneficial to you or positive. So whenever you come across an event, whenever an event happens in your life, you're at a crossroads. There is basically 2 paths that you can take moving forward once an event happens. You can either take the negative path or the positive path. And whichever path you choose will be the result of that, will be the outcome of that event. So, and the way you choose is through your relationship to that event. So let's say you stub your toe. You can either curse the world, get really angry, get mad, and be pissed off for the rest of the day. Or you can just ignore it. Or you can actually jump for joy and rejoice. Because you can like do whatever. And I usually just ignore it, because I don't really, sometimes I do like yes or something like that, but I usually just ignore it. And what that does is it protects. So when you get angry, you're causing that situation to be actually bad. And then what happens is another situation gets thrown at you, which is worse. And then you interpret that bad again, and then it just repeats. So then you get down this downhill cycle. But when you just don't react at all, you're simply just protecting yourself from the next situation, negative situation. And then also what this can do, let's say you get fired from your job, and then you interpret that as really bad. You are like depressed, you get super angry at the world, you just interpret it negatively in general. That will actually cause you to get even worse events, or your life will basically go on a downhill spiral simply because of your relationship to that event. Now, if you were to have interpreted it as good, and the world is like looking out for you, and like the world has something else in mind, or you would have been like, everything happens for a reason, like this is actually working out for the best for me. if your relationship to you getting fired from your job is that, then it will be just that, and then it will actually turn out to be a positive event. Like your life will actually turn positive as a result. Like you'll end up finding this other job, or you'll end up creating a new like a business that is way better, and your life ends up better, or something like that. It's all about your relationship to problems, and it's all about your relationship to the world. So since the world is a mirror, the mirror of the world reflects your relationship to it. So if you were to curse at the world, then it will curse at you back, and then your life will be terrible. If you are to jump for joy and rejoice every single thing that happens and love the world, well, then the world will love you back. And this is something that I did put into practice my first time I read Transurfing, and I did it for a while, and then recently, like maybe a month ago, I actually just stopped. Like I gradually just stopped for some reason. But now I'm putting it back into practice, and I've definitely found like results, because even just little things. So my routine is very strict in the morning, especially. I do the same exact thing every single morning, and that involves cooking. And a lot of the times, like sometimes maybe once a week, I'm missing like butter, or I'm missing some ingredient in my that I need to cook with. And before I read Transurfing, I would have just got pissed off about it and then just kept cooking, kept go out my day, but I'd just be mad about that. And then I just go on a downhill spiral, because I would get thrown into another negative situation, and then I get mad. But since I'm following coordinating intention, I don't follow it for little nuisances like that. I don't like get excited, because I find it difficult to get excited. So I do the next best thing, which is to simply just do not even react. Just be like, oh, okay. Just be absolutely empty to it. And you always get through it. Like, it's not the end of the world if you don't have butter and you have to use because I always have coconut oil or olive oil. So if I don't have butter, I'll just use olive oil or coconut oil. Like, it's no big deal. And simply just react empty. Be empty to it. Don't even react to it at all. Just go on with your day and don't let it disturb you. But there's a lot of other things that I actually do react positively to. And I'm blanking on specific examples right now, but there are a lot of times throughout the day where just little things happen. Like, actually today, for example, we actually had fruit, but we didn't have any snacking fruit like grapes or berries or anything. But today when I looked in the fridge, there were grapes and then there were blackberries, and we never have blackberries. So I looked in the fridge and I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, the world is taking care of me. Like, this is amazing. And so I actually had blackberries. And it's just those little things that happen. And Vadim Zeland said that coordination is the most effective means of traveling the alternative space, traveling across the alternative space. And the alternative space is basically it basically has everything that was, is, and will be. And it is so when you're dreaming, anything is possible. That's because you're flying through the alternative space. But when you're awake and you're in waking reality, then there are set things. It's kind of like anything is possible, but it takes a while to happen, basically. And that's because the material sector is only one specific sector of the alternative space. So the alternative space is this big whole thing, but the materialized area is only this one area. So imagine a This is actually one example he gave. So imagine walking through a dark forest. Now, that entire dark forest is the alternative space, but imagine you're walking with a lamp, like a fire or like a torch. That lit up area is the materialized sector. So that's like the world we live in, that lit up area. And you can move around. So when you're walking around that forest, you're basically walking towards your goal. So let's say you walk towards the goal, like you know where the goal is in the alternative space. So you know where your goal is in the forest. You simply just have to walk towards it. And that's basically what that is. So the way you walk towards it is by following coordination, which is to go with the flow, remain balanced, and like reduce your grip of control, interpret all events as positive. And I feel like I'm missing something, but that's pretty much the gist. Like, basically just listen to your heart and mind. That's what I was missing also. Listen to your heart and mind and unify them. So have your left brain and your right brain unified. And then you just you go with the flow and move one step forward in front of the other. You visualize your target slide. So visualize the destination, your goal, as it has already been achieved. And then you visualize the current sector of the transfer link. So visualize your current like objective right now, or your current task that you have to do in like the near future, like close future. And so I want to bring you back to that forest. So basically, I'm going to create a metaphor. The world, like life is simply just you were placed in a forest, you were given a torch, and it's dark out. So you were placed in a dark forest. Now, life is all about you getting to your goal, right? So we're trying to get to our goals. You were placed in one spot that's not near your goal, but you know your goal. So you know kind of the direction to walk towards, but you don't know the specific path to get to your goal. You kind of just know the direction. And basically all you do is you know your goal, you go with the flow. And then you place one foot in front of the other. So just keep on walking one foot in front of the other. And then whenever you come across, let's say there's a river or something like that, that's an obstacle. You reduce the importance, and then what that does is you are able to like have a clear mind of that problem. And then a lot of the times and then what you do is you release the grip of control of that situation. So you will let that situation resolve itself. Or actually, since a river is probably not going to move, let's use a better example. Let's say you come across a snake, like a venomous snake. So you are walking forward towards your goal, and then there's a snake in front of you on the path. So basically, all you have to do is release your grip of control in the situation. So let the situation play out. Don't try and manage or control the situation. Just let the situation play out of its own accord, but you first drop your importance. So make sure that snake only arose because you created that problem. So drop the importance associated with it and go with the flow. So basically, allow that situation to kind of develop on its own. And then what will happen is the snake will actually just move out of your way. And then you can continue to place one foot in front of the other, being mindful of your importance levels and keeping them at a 0. And then eventually there will be something that happens. You'll discover your door. So you'll discover the right path or the route towards that goal. And when that happens, then you enter that door and then you walk that path. So let's say you find a job or you find a business or I don't know, but it's basically your path towards the goal. And then what happens is you keep walking forward and you're 100% guaranteed success. Since this is your goal and your door, you're 100% guaranteed success unless you yourself decide against it. And the way you decide against it is by one, giving up, or placing too much importance, creating dependent relationships, and trying to control the situation, like not going with the flow, trying to control everything. But if you simply just follow coordination and keep placing one foot forward in front of the other, you're guaranteed success. And then eventually you will walk over to that goal. Now, let's go back. Let's say I want to remind you of what I said a little bit earlier. Coordination is the most effective means of traveling across the alternative space. That's what Vadim Zahn said. Now, I'm reminding you this because let's go back to that forest example where you had your torch and you were walking towards your goal. You encountered a snake, you encountered all this stuff. And then you found your door, but in the forest, you're walking with your torch, right? That initial spot you were at, the second you moved away from it, it was not lit up anymore. So it was not bright. It just like disappeared, kind of. So that means that your life will shift and changes will happen. So your initial scenery, your initial kind of script, when you were originally at that first spot, let's say you started in the middle of the forest and there was you were just standing there for years and you knew that scenery very well. There was 3 bushes to your left. There was a apple tree to your right. There was a pond on the floor, a small pond with 2 fish in there. Like you knew that scene very well and you were very comfortable with it. So the second you move away from it and you start moving towards your goals, changes will happen in your life. So now instead of the 3 bushes to your left, there might be only 1 now. So that's a change. Now, a lot of like the natural human tendency is to interpret that as bad because anything that is not in the mind's like plan or script is like interpreted as bad because the mind cannot see that it's helpful. So let's say when you lose that area, so you're walking towards your goal and you're in a new area, there's only 1 bush, there is no pond, and there is like a banana tree instead. You're probably gonna interpret it as bad. You're gonna be like, no, like this is bad. But no, this is actually good because you're moving towards your goals. And then that original location is no longer materialized. It's no longer in you. Like it's no longer in your layer of the world. And then once you keep on moving 1 foot forward and further in front of the other, in like 2 months, you're going to be in an absolutely different environment. Maybe instead of being in the forest, you might be in the jungle now. Maybe you'll be in like the jungle with a bunch of like thicket, and it's going to be like a very like a way different environment. Or maybe you'll be in the desert, an absolutely different environment. These are all changes, but this is the path that gets to your goal. Like the world knows the path. We do not know the path. It's impossible for the mind to know the path towards our goal. And so when you were originally in your comfortable area, and mind you, it was only comfortable because you were used to it. Like it wasn't comfortable necessarily. Like the old couch, the old chair is always more comfortable than the new chair. Even though the new chair has brand new, fresh, like padding, and the padding is like luxury, and it's like especially made for comfort. The old chair is more comfortable because you're used to it, and it's like been it's like your normal. It's your norm. Like that new chair, you're not used to it. You're not. It's like change. It's change. And so that desert, once you get to the desert and you're not in the jungle anymore, you make it to the desert. That's change, and you're not going to like it. But you just have to remind yourself that this is the path forward. Like, this is the path that the world has given me. Like, I cannot, like, there's no way for me to know the right path forward. And whatever you plan, like, if you plan for something to have, it rarely happens. So let me give you an example of when you plan for something to happen. Like many episodes back, it was probably posted on like I don't know. It was like before September. I was talking about how I wasn't going to check the analytics on my podcast. And for some context, I was checking my analytics on the podcast over maybe the first 1 or 2 weeks. And then I stopped. And the first 1 or 2 weeks, I was getting consistent growth. But I was only at like less than 300 views, like downloads total. And then once I kind of just stopped, and then I realized that I hadn't checked my analytics for a while, so I decided to wait until like September, and then I checked then. And I created this whole plan. Oh, since I'm growing very fast, I will have like thousands of downloads and thousands of people listening to me on every single episode. And so when that happens and I check the analytics, I'll be able to monetize. And then once the show, and then I'll monetize the show and offer a coaching session. And then I'll do 5 coaching sessions for $100 an hour. And then I was gonna find a common theme. So find a common like need or pain point amongst 5 different clients, and then address that and create a product that addresses it. And then that will be the business. And then I'll like create a business around that. But the issue is my mind created that plan, and there's no way for me to know. Like when you plan for something to happen, it rarely happens. Like when you plan something now, it rarely happens that way. Like ever. It never happens that way. And so that was my elaborate plan. But who am I to like know my right path forward? I'm still walking through the jungle, and I haven't made it to the desert yet. And who knows what's after who knows if I'm even going to the desert? Who knows? Like I'm not to know. Maybe I'm going to the like Antarctica or something. I don't know. Who knows my path? No one. And like that's what I'm trying to put out. Like we cannot know our paths. We simply can only know our goal and our door, and like simply all we have to do is just place one foot in front of the other and only focus on the present, but also focus on our goal too. But that's basically all there is to it. And I forgot about that, to be honest, obviously, because a couple weeks ago I was literally creating a whole plan on to move forward. Now that plan was good. Like it's good to have plans for entrepreneurship, but the second it failed, like the second I realized that there was only like less than 300 downloads or less than 400 or something like that, like there was a little bit amount of downloads. Once I realized that I still had basically the same analytics as I did a couple of weeks ago, I had 2 options. I could either interpret it as bad, or I could interpret it as good. But what I chose was I simply did not even, I was like, oh, okay. And then I realized I just didn't interpret it as bad. I simply just realized my mistake. I realized that, oh, who am I to plan things out? Like, who am I to know exactly my path forward? And that's that's what we've been doing all our lives. Like that's what most people do all their lives. And look where it gets them. Absolutely nowhere. So if you want to be unlike the rest, you got to think unlike the rest. And no one thinks like transurfing. So transurfing is the way. Let me get some water. So there's one thing that I was thinking about doing, and it's because I'm not sure if I really like the way these episodes are playing out because a lot of the times I go back and forth and back and forth. Like a lot of the times I'm talking about like bolt score, and then the next second I'm talking about meditating, and then the next second I'm talking about bolt score again. Like there's no real structure. I kind of just hit play, say my intro, and hope for something to come out, and then just roll with it. And so I just wing it on all of my episodes. There's no real script or structure. But I was like earlier today or the other day, I was thinking back because I used to listen to podcasts a lot. And I remembered this one time of this one podcast that I used to listen to. And I remember just this 1 minute where he was like talking about this. He was talking about one topic for like 20 minutes. And then he was like, I just want to say this last thing real quick because I'm running out of time, even though there was still like 40 minutes left in the episode. And then once he said that thing, he switched to the next topic and then talked for like 20 minutes and then switched to the next one. And so I don't know how he actually structures his podcast, but what I kind of determined from that memory today, I determined that he writes down like 3 or 4 topics to talk about. And then if there's 4 topics written down, he just talks about those in order. So he spends 25 minutes talking about the first one and then switches. 25 minutes talking about the second one and then switches. Wait, I was thinking 100-minute episodes. No, it's 60-minute episodes. So he would spend 60 divided by 4. So whatever that is, like 2, 4, 6. Wait, 2, 4, 6. I don't even, wait. Oh, 15. Okay, so he would spend 15 minutes talking about the first and then 15 on the second. Like he would speak for 15 minutes on each topic. And that has a lot more structure, and that makes it so like the viewer has all of one, like the viewer is only focusing on one topic, and then they can switch to the next completely. And what I've been doing is I talk about one topic and then switch to the next and then switch to the next and then the next. And then I go back to that first one. So I don't know like how, I don't know if you guys like it or not. Like you should, if you have any like comments, let me know at my email at james@ascendmomentum.com. And let me know about that because to be honest, that like I want to know your input on that because I'm not even sure if I could, well, I'm sure I could think of like topics to talk about for that day, but a lot of, I don't know if it would work out that well because that podcast I was listening to was not necessarily documenting the journey. That podcast was simply just like teaching a lot of content. So I'm sure they were learning the content along the way, but it was more of like a health podcast. And like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to document my journey from being like a high school student, broke, to achieving my goals in life. Like that's what I'm trying to document. And I'm not sure if it would like work out. I'm sure it would because basically I think that my episodes have followed a common structure throughout like this show. Usually I start by talking about something that happened in my day and then I figure something out in the middle of that conversation. Like today I was talking about, I don't even know what I was talking about, but then I like connected it to that forest. Like I had no plan. Like I hadn't even remembered about the forest. Like I'm pretty sure he teaches like that forest metaphor in the beginning of Transurfing. So the last time I read that was like 2 months ago, probably. So like I had no intention, like I hadn't even remembered about the forest for over 2 months, but it just popped in my head and I started talking about it. And that like ended up being like a very long conversation. So I don't know if I'd be able to have the same quality, because a lot of the times I feel like my best episodes are the ones that I just completely wing it, and then I get into the zone, and then I just start going on like this long tangent or like talking about something, and I just keep talking and spewing out a lot of information, and everything just kind of clicks together. And I feel like those are my best, but I'm a little worried that I may lose that aspect if I structure things. But then again, I could just like have a loose structure where because this is kind of what I did in the beginning, towards the beginning of my episodes, where I was a little worried that I wouldn't be able to think of a lot of different things to say. And actually one episode, after I stopped doing that, one episode, I just like was having a really hard time getting in the zone or even thinking about stuff to say. So I actually went through and wrote out like 7 or 8 different topics to talk about, and that got me into the zone. So that's like kind of what I did in the beginning, where I would write down a bunch of different topics, like some things that happened in my day, some lessons, and then just try and get through them all and like speak on them as much as I could. But most of the time that would only last like less than 30 minutes. So then I'd still have to wing it for the rest of the episode. And a lot of the times so on my podcast editor, I use podcastle.ai. I actually, before episode 28, before I got this microphone, I would record on this voice recorder and then upload it to Podcastle AI. But now I just record straight onto Podcastle AI because I have a microphone connected to my PC now. And then I like edit, but I don't like edit like normal. I just use their like software tools, and it's basically just a background remover and then a noise leveling thing. But there's also a third option, and it's remove the silence option. And what that is it just removes the silence. So that silence that just happened like 1 second ago that I just did, it would have removed that. And in the beginning, I was thinking like maybe I should remove it. But then my rationale for not removing it was because I wanted it to be like an authentic, unedited clip. Like full clip and no edits, because that's like that's the type of podcast I would listen to back in the day, just unedited clips. And those are like when I would watch Hamza on YouTube, I would like those episodes the best, where he would just be talking unedited for like an hour and a half or something like that. Like those were my favorite episodes. So that's like kind of what I'm trying to do here. But there are a lot of times where I'm just like just not thinking, and I can't think of anything. And that's usually when I take my water. I usually like say, let me get some water, and then I get my water so I can have enough time to think about something. But I don't know. And also in the beginning, this is how I can tell I'm making a lot of growth in my podcasting. Like even now, after 55 episodes, like it's apparent. It's very apparent the growth that I've made from episode 1 to 55. Now I haven't re-listened to episode 1 since like I actually recorded it. I don't even think I've ever listened to it, but just from my memory, I know that this episode is way better than episode 1. That's simply because my skills are getting better. Like, I remember episode 7 or 14 and 21. I think those episodes were like my best episodes yet, like at the time. But I have a prediction that this episode is better than my best episode yet in the beginning, simply because my baseline skill level has increased. And like on episode 21 or 20 or whichever episode it was that was my best, that was like me in my peak form, like peak flow zone. I was in the zone, but my baseline skill was really low because I was just starting. Like I was just 20 episodes in. But now that I'm 55 episodes in, my baseline skill level, even if I'm not necessarily in the flow, is like way higher. So that's what I'm thinking is that. But I'll tell you another reason why I think that I've grown a lot, like I've improved a lot more as a podcaster, because going back to that, what's that thing called? That remove the silence option on the podcast. It would say like how many silences there are. And in the beginning, there was like 1,000 or like 800 silences. Like there was 800 times in my 1 hour long episode where I was silent. Like 800 times. Like that's a lot. And now it's still a lot, but I determined that anything that's below 500 is good. And yesterday it was like 380 silences. So it may have been yesterday or the day before. Like the last time I really checked. And so that's like improvement. 380 I think is really good. And I'm actually very curious to see how much is in here, because I feel like I was in the flow, in the zone, a decent amount of like a decent percentage of this show. So I don't know. I'm curious to see if I remember. I'll tell you guys how much I got tomorrow in episode 56. I'll remind you, but if I don't, whatever. But let me get some water. So I just told you guys a couple minutes ago that the reason why I get oftentimes the times when I get water, like I have to take a break to get water, is because I kind of ended my flow, or I ended like that piece of conversation and nothing new came in. So I wanted like a moment to figure out what to say next. And that's exactly what happened. And I did figure out something to say, but I wanted to explain that first. And I was going to talk about the heart and the mind. So this is something that I've been talking about a lot, and I'm going to explain the scientific reasoning behind it. And so you have two sides of your brain. Everyone, like, this is facts. Everyone knows this. Or not necessarily everyone knows this, but like this is well known amongst like science. Like this is a well known fact. And if you just look at a brain, look up a picture of a brain, there's a left side and a right side, and like it's split down the middle kind of. But actually, I don't know if it's split down the middle. I'm going to look up a picture of the brain after this. I haven't looked at a picture in a while. But what I'm trying to say is there's a left side and there's a right side. And they actually do different things. So your left side, the left hemisphere. I don't know if the left hemisphere is the same thing as the left side, but I am just going to assume it is for these purposes. And basically the left side is all about receiving information, like interpreting information from the external world, like from every day. So right now your left side is receiving this information. And then it's also using logical analyzing. It's using reasoning. It's using language. It can understand language, and it's using like, I think it's what uses math as well. And then the right side listens to everything the left side says to it, like unconditionally, or not unconditionally, but like like I don't know the right word for it, but it basically listens to everything the left side says to it, like absolutely, and it never like throws anything out from the left side. So anything the left side says to it, the right side will basically like do, or kind of. I don't really know how I should reread that, where I learned this from the analysis and assessment of the gateway process. Literally the first paragraph on which was called hypnosis. But the right side listens to it, the left side, and does it, and it like believes everything it says. Yeah, I think that's the word I was looking for. It believes everything the left side says to it. And the right side is like emotional. It knows things. It feels things. And it just knows, like, it knows everything, kind of. Or not necessarily everything, but it has access to everything. And the left side is actually the mind, and the right side is the heart. So in transurfing terms, the left side's the mind, the right side's the heart. And why is this important? This is important because transurfing is one of the main principles of transurfing is unifying the heart and the mind. And it's basically unifying your brain, like having one whole brain instead of a divided brain. Because on a day-to-day, most people, they have a split or a divide in their brain. So basically, there's a wall built up in between the left side and the right side of the brain. And so they don't work together. Now imagine that. You have two pieces to your brain and they're not working together. Like just the left side is doing all the stuff. Like the left side is not listening to the right side and the left side is just going its own way. Imagine that. I'm trying to think of an object that has two pieces to it. Oh, so imagine a bicycle. The front wheel is your heart, your right side of the mind, and the back wheel is your mind, the left side. Imagine if the back wheel just decided to do whatever it wants. So the front wheel, since it's not attached to the gears, the front wheel just kind of goes along whatever the back wheel does. And you're basically controlling the back wheel. So when the back wheel decides to the front wheel does whatever, but let's say the back wheel just kind of decides to like steer off course. Like that, the front wheel is not going to be able to steer off course because the front wheel is attached to the steering wheel, like the actual handlebars of the bike. So if your back wheel kind of like turns and then tries to steer off course, the front wheel is not going to do the same thing because it's attached to the handlebars. So imagine how dysfunctional a bike would be if the back wheel kind of just decided to go its own path, and imagine how dysfunctional the bike would be if the back wheel and the front wheel didn't work together. Like they were kind of just doing their own things. The bike only works because the front and the back wheel are unified and they're like acting together, like unified, in sync. So imagine how bad the bike would be. Like it would just be broken. Like the bike would actually just not work if the back wheel did something different from the front wheel. And that is basically what we're doing from a day to day. Like that is us. Our left brain is doing something absolutely different from our right brain. Like they're not unified. They're not in agreement on the day to day. So if you can just imagine how bad a very simple object, like a bicycle, like from an objective point of view, a bicycle is far simpler than the human brain. Like just, you can agree with me on that. Like a bicycle is complicated, but it's simple because there's really all you need is like the wheels, the gears, or the one gear, and then like the chain and the steering wheel, like the frame, the seat, like the fact that humans can make it, like you could probably learn to make a bicycle in weeks, months, maybe years. And you could make one from scratch probably, given the right materials. But the human brain is far more complex, so there's a lot more going on with it. So imagine if a bicycle was just simply broken, like the bicycle it didn't work properly, and it's a simple thing. Imagine how bad it would be if the human brain was in a similar predicament where it would be divided and it would not work optimally. Now, it's not hard to imagine because that's what most people, including me, like a lot of the times from a day-to-day basis are doing that. Like my brain and mind, or my heart and mind are divided. Now I'm working towards undividing them. Excuse me. Let me get some water. I have some hiccups. No, I said I get water to start talking, like figure out something new to say, but that time I actually needed water to stop my hiccups. But what I was saying is we're living, like most people live with a divided, like a faulty, a broken mind, a broken brain, because one wheel is going opposite directions from the other wheel. Now, there's good news in this. The fact that most people have gone all their lives with a broken bicycle and they've managed this far, well, honestly, it's probably not that far. They probably hasn't achieved much. But if they've gone all their lives, imagine how amazing it would be once they actually fixed their bicycle and it started going in sync. Like, let's say you biked 100 miles with a broken bicycle. And it took like 30 years. And I'm actually using the bicycle as a metaphor. I just wanted to clarify that for like the past couple minutes, I've been using the bicycle as a metaphor for the brain. So I just want to clarify that just in case. But imagine you were spending 30 years and you biked 100 miles. 100 miles, that's pretty far. But it took 30 years. But you did do it with a broken bicycle. So one wheel was going in a different direction to another wheel. But you somehow managed to make it work, kind of. So imagine how amazing it would be if you all of a sudden just fixed and aligned, unified those wheels and just put them into agreement of one direction. So imagine how amazing it would be. You could ride 100 miles in one day. Like many people do that. Many people can do that. Like my dad ran an Ironman and he biked like 150 miles in one day. Like that is one of the pieces to the Ironman race, 150 miles in one day. Like it would take most people 30 years to bike 100 miles, but you could just do it in one day as long as your wheels are aligned. So how this can be applied into real life, simply just get your heart and mind into agreement. Now, that is easier said than done, but what I am doing right now, my actual practical steps, like applicable steps that I'm doing right now is whenever I'm making decisions or I'm about to make a decision, I kind of imagine myself having made one decision or the decision I'm planning on taking, and then kind of just listening to my inner feeling, like the inner tension. And that's called the rustle of the morning stars. Now, the Rustle of the Morning Stars is basically the heart telling you like its opinions, or telling you about that specific decision or that thing that you just did. Now, the heart always knows exactly what it does not want. So if you have inner tension, you have an inner discomfort after having made that decision, go back on that decision, because that is not that's not the right decision to make. And also, if your mind is trying to convince yourself or persuade yourself to go with this decision, drop it, because that's not your decision. If it's truly if that decision is yours to make, like it's your right path forward, then you won't need to convince yourself. You'll just know that it's the right path forward and you'll do it. But also the heart does not necessarily know exactly what it wants. So it could have you could have no feeling, no inner tension, but also no inner joy. So that blankness, that emptiness it just means that it's not necessarily bad, because the heart always knows what it does not want. So the emptiness does not necessarily mean yes, but it does not mean no. So take with you will. And that's basically what I'm trying to do. But I'll tell you, it's difficult. Or not difficult, but the whole point to this, the whole thing, it only works if you remember, and you remember in time. Because if you remember, but it's past time, you can't go back on the decision, well, then there's no point. You failed, kind of. Well, yeah, you failed, but the whole task is to remember in time to listen to the Rustle of the Morning Stars. And once you can do that, you'll know that you're going to take the right path. Because if you just start listening to the heart, then you can move forward. And also I just remembered, if the heart doesn't say no, but it also doesn't say yes, then allow your mind to make the final decision. And if your mind says no, then don't go with the decision. But if your mind says yes, then go with the decision. I think that's how that works out. But I kind of just had deja vu from that. That's one thing that I'm looking into. I'm going to completely shift the topic for the last couple minutes, because I just finished with that topic. But I was looking into the Gateway experience a little bit more last night, and I stumbled upon this one forum page, and it was the Big Toe or something like that. It was weird. That title was weird to me, because the Big Toe, that's weird. And then I was looking into it, and it's actually about a book, and it's all about out of body experiences, or I don't even know what the book was about, but there was one piece of that forum where there was this one commenter that commented about an out of body experience, and I learned a little bit more about out of body experiences, and I'm pretty sure astral projection is what an out of body experience is. I don't know for sure though. I'm brand new to this, and there's one thing for sure. I want to experience an out of body experience, and to help do that, I am going to work on the Gateway process, and I actually ordered the first CD. I talked about it today, but it's delayed at customs, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean I can't practice, because I have been working on my deep meditations as well, even without the CD. Because people were able to get the out-of-body experience without the CDs. So this practice is not in vain. I'm still benefiting from this extra practice, even though I'm not getting the actual CD. So that's pretty much where I'm at. And also, I wanted to give you an update on the pine pollen tincture. For context, I bought the pine pollen tincture, and it gave me a headache, and I predict it's because there's alcohol in it. I emailed the company, and I have not gotten a response yet, but I haven't checked it today. So I'll check that, and that's the end of the episode. So to wrap things up, don't forget to download your favorite episodes and subscribe to the Ascend Momentum Show. But before you guys leave, make sure to remember the Eagles.